Roadshow News Recap starts right now. This week we are hitting the highlights of the Munich Auto Show. BMW released a concept car that is all about recyclability. Mercedes-Benz unveiled a horde of new all-electric models, including the Maybach EQS SUV concept. They've got a new EQE sedan, and then of course they showed us the EQG off-road model, which you have got to see. Then there's the Porsche Mission R, which is a race-ready design study. We will talk all about that in today's show. And then of course Volkswagen unveiled yet another concept in its ID vehicle family. So much to talk about, so we may as well get started. Happy Friday, everyone. Our usual co-host, Sean Simkowski, is out this week. He's, I hear, selling counterfeit Cheddar Bay biscuits. But we are joined once again by Roadshow Reviews editor Antuan Goodwin. Antuan, so good to see you again. Thanks for filling in, as always.
Thanks for having me. Fun fact, there are counterfeit Cheddar Bay biscuits in my fridge right now, but Sean didn't make those.
Oh my good, he didn't? Okay, there's a whole counterfeit Cheddar Bay biscuit business, eh? I bet it'd be
pretty easy to make.
Well, very good. You'll have to send us the recipe. But yeah, great show lined up today. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're tuning in live, or if you're watching the recorded version, you can do that as well. And consider ringing the bell so you are always notified when something new posts to the Roadshow News YouTube channel. But first up on the docket today, Antuan, we've got the Mercedes-Maybach EQS concept SUV. This is a very striking vehicle, but according to Mercedes-Benz, it's supposedly a near production model. And of course, it's previewing in a future all-electric Maybach. When I first saw this, I was a little bit, I was taken aback because it has some presence.
Yeah, it's a good-looking SUV, actually. EQ design language that Mercedes is doing better, actually, than their sedans right now.
Yes, it's definitely got presence, and that huge grille is unmistakable. It rolls on 24-inch wheels. But my favorite part of this whole vehicle, aside from the interior, which is amazing, but I love the two-tone paint job, that red and I guess black, or is it a dark green or gray? It just really looks sharp. I wish I could have seen it in person.
Right. It's kind of like if you're going to get a Maybach, you got to get two-tone paint. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your time. One of the things that I think is a little odd about this is that they call it the EQS SUV as opposed to something else. I think that calling two vehicles basically EQS is going to get a little bit confusing when this hits the market, if it hits the market. And so I'm wondering if they kind of want to kind of get ahead of the ball with that sort of confusion and kind of deal with their sort of naming scheme now before it gets too awkward.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. One I hadn't considered because, yeah, you don't want two vehicles with the same basic name, especially if they're not like really related. The EQS is not a Maybach level vehicle necessarily. So
right.
They should probably be planning on coming up with something different for this SUV.
Well, yeah, more like sedan versus SUV feels like it needs a different name.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just like EQM Maybach or something. I don't know. But what's your take on that interior, Antuan?
I mean, it's basically peak Maybach, pushed into the future. Lots of glowy bits, which is kind of what you want from a concept car. And I think if you sort of base that sort of on what people are doing with their desks and with their computers these days, just sort of lots of glowing lights and cool colors. It looks like a great place to hang out.
Absolutely. And it should have a couple champagne flutes for non-alcoholic beverages, I'm sure.
Well,
and of course, a refrigerated compartment. Maybe elsewhere other than the US. But you also get the giant hyper screen on the dashboard, or I should say screens, because it's like 3 individual panels under that giant piece of glass. I have not had a chance to see that in person yet, but I am intrigued by it because it looks pretty sweet in photos. The only thing I don't really care for on this vehicle is that Grand Wagoneer-esque, the greenhouse trim, that bright work that goes around the side glass. That's not doing it for me so much. I don't know what you think.
It does pop perhaps a bit too much. Maybe on a different color. Maybe if the chrome were less of a hard contrast with the really vibrant red and the really dark black, it would sort of blend in a little better, be more of a treat visually. But yeah, in this color scheme, it for sure sticks out a bit much.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the Mercedes-Maybach EQS, but in the sort of I guess the opposite end of the spectrum, right? We got a BMW.
Yeah, the opposite. Yeah, a lot less opulent, a lot more eco-friendly, and it's a lot of people think that being super eco-friendly is modern luxury, and that's where BMW's iVision circular concept comes in. It aims to be the most sustainable vehicle ever, and the circular part of the concept doesn't refer to the shape of the vehicle, but the materials loop of the things that it's composed of. So every piece of this little vehicle, this little electric car, is made from a sustainable or a recycled or a reclaimable material. And every piece of it then can be recycled or reclaimed at the end of the vehicle's life cycle, all the way down to its solid state electric battery. So you can even recycle the battery. So in order to reach this goal, there's no paint, there's no leather. All of the upholstery bits are sort of held in place with stitching or cord in interesting ways. And there are no bonded materials, no adhesives or plastics that can't be reclaimed. Now, there probably are some plastics in it because bits of the interior, like that big old crystal dashboard that they've got, are composed of 3D printed materials. But I think some 3D printable plastics can actually be ground down and reprinted into things again.
Yeah, I don't know how you could build a modern vehicle without any plastic at all. It would be, I think that'd be impossible. But
sure,
yeah,
I mean, you could use bioplastics that break down or biodegradable. You can use, again, like I said, plastics that can be reground up and 3D printed. Some automakers are actually experimenting right now with using 3D printable materials in manufacturing that they can grind down and reprint again to make molds for products and things. So it's doable for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But a very interesting take too, not having any paint on the car and eschewing leather. Obviously, farming cattle is a bit carbon intensive, both from the food that they eat and their own emissions. So eliminating that in a vehicle can help make it obviously more sustainable. The kidney grills on this thing, of course. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying in order to get by not having paint, they've used aluminum for the exterior and they gold anodized it and so there's some blue bits on the outside that they use by heat treating the metal. I think that somewhat limits. You can only really get this car in one color going forward, and that color is gold anodized aluminum. But it is an interesting sort of conceptual look at how to make a car as green as possible. You were about to say something about the kidney grill, though, which is pretty intense.
Yeah, we know BMW has a problem with its grills getting kind of out of control these days, and this one's pretty big on this concept. But it's also, they've turned it into a display of sorts. So it kind of, I guess like a Cadillac Lyric or something, it lights up and can do different, put on a show or something for you. It's not particularly attractive to me, but.
Well, I think going forward, as one of the things that this vehicle has is vehicle to infrastructure communication or vehicle to everything communication. And I think that automakers are looking at ways to use the grille to communicate with other drivers beyond just your turn signal. So it can do things like display the charge state, or it can, if you're approaching an intersection, maybe you could use it to let a pedestrian know that it's cool for them to go. Or maybe we can get past the days where you have to do this thing when you want somebody to come on through the intersection. It's my least favorite part about driving is having to see through people's tint to this thing when it's their turn to go.
Yeah,
anyway. Right. But yeah, it's an interesting look. And I think that BMW has sort of been pushing the envelope of sustainable interior, starting all the way back with the i3. And this is kind of the logical stretch of that. I think it's probably a vehicle about the same size, fully electric. So yeah, I think that maybe this previews where we can see from the future of that vehicle, maybe a less extreme, slightly less sustainable version of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a noteworthy goal, a target to reach for. I don't know how long it would take or how much it would cost to achieve like a truly sustainable vehicle. Maybe it's not as much as I think, but we're certainly not there today with what automakers are doing. But yeah, they said all electric, of course, but they did not share any powertrain details on this BMW concept, which is unfortunate, but also not that big of a deal because it's just a concept. So it doesn't really matter what they say it has because it's probably not real.
And its city car goals kind of preclude a lot of the sort of range anxiety. If you're just using it to putter around town, you maybe don't need to go that far. Power is not that big of a deal. It's not really the focus of this car. But also, if it's built completely using, stitching and cords to hold body panels onto the vehicle so that it, doesn't use any adhesives, how does that work with crash safety? Do you even want to go fast? Do you want to hit 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds in a vehicle that's held together with shoestrings? So maybe this is more of a let's downplay the performance aspect of it and sort of upplay. Upplay, is that even a word? Play up the rest of the concept.
We'll allow it. But yeah, that's a very good point. I'm sure BMW would make it perfectly safe, but to your point, like if it's held together with thread and stuff, I guess does raise some questions. In the YouTube chat, GRGHLG says a concept of the next 7 Series would interest me more. Yeah, I guess so. I could see that because that's a model.
No doubt they're working on it.
Obviously, make. Yeah, of course. But moving along, another Mercedes concept, the or I guess I shouldn't say concept. This is a production model, the EQE electric sedan, and it's another one of their all-electric vehicles that looks like a bar of soap. It's very, very rounded, very smooth, and it's like a bar of dial that is well used in the shower. It's there's not a lot of form to it, and obviously with an electric car, aerodynamics. I mean, any vehicle. But especially with electric cars, aerodynamics is very important. So you need to make that body as slippery as possible. But perhaps they've taken it too far. I don't know.
I'm never going to be able to unsee that now.
Yeah, it's just very soft and smooth. And it's just like the EQS, right? It just looks like a slightly smaller version of that. So again, I've got to see it out on the road to really appreciate it, see it in natural light rather than just photos or video. But based on what I've seen so far, I'm not entirely sold. But anyway, the EQE is built on the same architecture as the larger EQS. And when it comes out, it will only be offered with a rear-wheel drive configuration and a single electric motor that'll get you 288 horsepower and 391 pounds of torque, which isn't all that much, but it's still enough to get this car to 60 miles per hour in less than 6 seconds. They're claiming about 5.6, which to be completely honest is more than enough. I mean, when you have cars that are doing it in less than 2, that's just crazy. Nobody needs that. Get off my lawn.
Somebody needs it. Everybody doesn't need it. I think your average EQ shopper, your average E-Class shopper really needs it. But what they've got is good enough to merge powerfully, to get away from the light quicker than the guy in the car next to you. And that's pretty much, I think, what most people are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So the EQE sedan here, they're launching it again, rear-wheel drive only to start, but then all-wheel drive will come supposedly at a later date. You get a 90.6 kilowatt-hour battery pack that they claim will give you 410 miles of range. On the very generous WLTP cycle, I would guess that would diminish to about 12 miles of range on EPA testing. Maybe not that bad of a
little more than that.
I'm being facetious, but yeah, certainly less on the U.S. testing regimen because it's a bit more rigorous. But we'll have to see once the EPA gets its hands on this car to know what that number will actually be. But charging time is pretty quick. They're saying 155 miles in about 15 minutes when you hook it to a DC fast charger, which is right in line with what other vehicles can provide these days. And then, of course, you get the hyper screen inside, which is kind of becoming a Mercedes-Benz signature these days in their electric vehicles, which is pretty cool because it's quite eye-catching. And then the EQE sedan is expected to go on sale in the U.S. Some point next year. And what we had in our story on the roadshow.com, pricing probably start around $65,000, which based on that interior, looks like a bargain if that's what you get for the base car. We will have
no telling, really. I mean, there's a pretty wide range, generally speaking, as far as how much luxury you can actually add on with options. And the Germans love their options and a la carte options that they add on. So could be a lot more expensive once you get to the point where you see that all white interior and all the cool LED accent lighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And the all white interior that stays all white for about a week and a half, probably, until you live in it. And then just the grime of everyday life turns it not white.
Yeah. One thing I think is a little off-putting about the design of this, and indeed with the larger EQS, is that weird cut line from the A-pillar to the middle of the wheel arch that creates that awkward little panel in front of the front door that looks like another door, especially on the driver's side where they've got that little washer fill port that looks like a handle. This car looks like a limousine. And I don't know if that's an intentional thing, if they're just trying to make the cars look wicked long, or if it's just, maybe no one really looked at it. Maybe someone is going, it does look like a door over in Germany right now. Who knows?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that. But that little washer door, that filler door that pops open on the driver's side front fender, looks like another door handle. But if I remember correctly, the EQS, and I would assume the EQE, doesn't have a front trunk. Does that sound correct to you, Antuan?
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm going to be driving the EQS at the end of this month. I'll have a look.
Nice.
I'm sure that someone on our staff has driven it, probably Mr. Kroc. But I don't think it does have a front trunk, if I'm not mistaken, which is, again, then why is the washer door on the side of the car instead of under the trunk?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, that cut line. I wonder if it's like there's a manufacturing reason they did that. Does it make the hood panel easier to service or something in a crash? Is it better for pedestrian safety or something? I don't know. But interesting,
seems like
nonetheless.
Mercedes would be able to engineer around that if they wanted to. It's definitely a decision that somebody made.
Yes.
There's some sort of design reason. And again, maybe it is to give that elongated appearance, another horizontal or horizontal-ish line in the flow of the vehicle that sort of tricks you into thinking the car is longer and lower than it actually is. There's automakers and their designers are real good at sort of creating these optical illusions. So I'm sure there's some reason for it. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, we'll have to reach out and find out. In the meantime, if you are watching Roadshow News Recap Live, thank you so much. Consider giving us a like and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Every little bit helps. And also, you might want to ring the bell so that you're notified whenever a new video posts on our channel. So give that a go if you could. We appreciate it very much. But next up, Antuan, another concept vehicle. This one from Porsche, and this one is all about racing.
All about racing. So there's, of course, it's called the Mission R for racing, and it's got red livery, red for racing. It is essentially about a Porsche 718 sized turnkey electric GT car. So the idea is that you've got this all-wheel drive, purpose-built electric coupe with around 85 kilowatt hours of battery pack. That should be good for around 30 to 45 minute race. So not endurance racing, but for sure like some sort of short GT style racing. And you've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,073 horsepower for qualifying. And then when it's time to actually do your laps, you can then step down to around 600 horsepower total. It, again, is around the size of a 718 Cayman GT4, but only around maybe 100 pounds more, 3,300 pounds total. The battery pack is integrated into the chassis under the floor. And interestingly, they've also integrated the roll cage, which is made of carbon fiber, into the roof of the vehicle, as opposed to a steel tube roll cage, which would go underneath the sheet metal roof. And that saves you some headroom, which is good because you're sitting on top of the battery already. Right now, you can't use carbon fiber roll cages in racing, but Porsche thinks that by the time they would think about building something like this around 2025, maybe that'll change. What do you think about this, Greg?
I've never heard of a carbon fiber roll cage. It seems like kind of a no-brainer, but they probably haven't been used very much, so they don't know how they actually perform in crashes. So I can understand why they might be a little hesitant to allow that. But very cool looking car, and with more than 1,000 horsepower, this thing undoubtedly goes like stink. Be interesting to see if Porsche builds it for its very well-heeled clientele. So I'm sure they would sell every one of them they can make, given the performance.
What's more interesting to me is the idea of, again, concept car, shoot for the moon. Production car, what does that look like? And the idea of something around the size of a Porsche Cayman with even just one electric motor in the back and around 400 horsepower, or optional all-wheel drive if you want it to go that way, around the size of this vehicle, looking something like this vehicle, maybe using less carbon fiber and sheet metal, maybe not being 3,300 pounds, but a bit more. You'd still have a ton of performance and a gorgeous looking vehicle. It'd be fully electric. Yes. It would definitely be something that would probably turn at least some heads from the upcoming Tesla Roadster.
If that ever gets built.
If it ever gets built.
Can that keeps getting kicked down the road.
What's becoming a tale of as old as time is that Tesla puts out a concept. They say we're about to build it, Cybertruck, Roadster. And then an automaker that actually knows what they're doing comes along and slides in with an F-150 Lightning or a Porsche Mission R before Tesla can get theirs built. Be cool.
It's a reoccurring theme with Tesla. We like to make fun of them, but they've done obviously a lot for the auto industry to really bring electrification to the forefront. But very
I'm sure Elon Musk can take a joke.
I would hope he can. I think he can. Nestor Escobar says that Porsche looks amazing. I would love to see it on the track. So would I, and I'm sure we would both love to drive it as well. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen, at least not before 2025, but we shall see. You mentioned 918, the generation Cayman and Boxster. How do you think Porsche is going to go about electrifying its sports cars? Because when you electrify vehicles, you end up with very large, very heavy batteries, and weight is the enemy of handling and road holding. How is Porsche going to balance that? Do you think they're going to go all electric or what?
Well, I think that, you look at what they've done with the Taycan, and that's obviously a large GT, but with something smaller that, like the 718s or even, a 911 style chassis, I think what they're going to have to do is what they've done here, and that's going to be invest heavily in composites. Look for ways to reduce weight elsewhere in the vehicle, because every car weighs something, and the advantage of reducing the weight everywhere else in the vehicle and then having that big old heavy ballast of a battery at the bottom can actually end up being a pro as far as weight distribution. You can keep the car nice and flat in the turns. You can even invest more in a more compliant suspension if you're not fighting against body roll. And then you get a car that's a better daily driver, that's better for the environment, but also a better performance car. So I think that writing's on the wall. They're for sure pushing in this direction and looking at doing something like this for the street. It's just a matter of, is it going to be 1,000 horsepower? Probably not. Is it going to be 85 kilowatts of battery? Is it going to be slightly smaller battery, something in the 65 kilowatt? Or are they waiting for something like solid state battery to take off so that they can, invest in a lighter battery technology going forward? Who knows?
Yeah. Nestor in the chat again is asking, how do you say "shut up and take my money" in German? Sounds like he's a big fan of the car. And according to Google Translate, it would be "sei ruhig und nimm mein Geld." So there you go. Shut up and take my money. Assuming Google Translate is correct.
Assuming. That was actually the first thing I thought when I saw this vehicle was, I'll take mine, Mr. Porsche. Who do I write the check to?
Yeah, right?
That check would probably bounce, but I'd write it.
Well, ask Tim Stevens, our editor-in-chief, for a little raise.
Or we can just get a long-termer.
That's an
Everyone can
even
have a
better
turn.
solution. Then you can drive it and enjoy it and not have to pay for it. Perfect idea. Next up, though, something a little different. Mercedes-Benz EQG concept, yet another Munich reveal from Mercedes-Benz. This is their take on the future of the G-Class off-roader. So there you can see very boxy design, but with lots of light-up elements added to the body. The grille kind of lights up like other EQS model or EQ models. There are some add-ons to the bodywork. There's a squared off what would normally be a spare tire, but I understand that's where the battery charger goes. That's on the rear hatch. It also lights up. So this is like the future of off-roading. They haven't really shared many technical details about this vehicle, but it sounds like it's going to be built on a ladder-style frame and probably share a lot of components with the existing G-Wagon. So that's pretty good news if you want a rugged off-roader, because obviously that thing is built to climb mountains just about anywhere. The battery, of course, is integrated into the frame, and that should get you an independent front suspension with a live axle at the rear. Power would be provided by 4 electric motors that Mercedes-Benz is saying are mounted close to the wheels. So that should give you, a number of different benefits. You can power each wheel individually, or you can simulate having a locking axle and doing all that fun stuff for better performance off-road. And speaking of performance, they're saying it should be very comparable to the existing G-Wagon, which is good news. And supposedly this vehicle is pretty close to production, and it could go on sale in a couple years, which, given their current cadence of introducing electric vehicles, seems entirely possible. So I don't know.
One of the details that just got me scratching my head is the concept of 4 presumably independent electric motors, 1 for each wheel, and then still going with a live axle rear suspension. That was obviously a choice that they made.
Yes.
And I really want nothing more now than to sit down with an engineer and talk about that.
Yes, isn't that? Now, maybe the concept has the live axle just to get it to roll out onto the auto show stage. But you're absolutely right. If you build this vehicle and it has a live axle and 4 independent hub motors, or just 1 motor per wheel, not necessarily mounted in the hub, that would be a very curious decision. Like, why not just go 4-wheel independent at that point?
Maybe they're doing something
which, like
weird
Ford did with the
maybe
Lightning.
the rear axle isn't independent. I don't know. I have so many questions now, and I want to talk to an engineer about this. But I mean, other than that, this concept's perfect. Just put a price tag on it and start selling it. I mean, no changes, just no notes. It looks amazing.
Yeah. I know Daniel Golson, our social media guy, I believe he covered this reveal, and he was blown away by it when he saw it. So yeah, pretty cool. The only thing I don't care for is the weird G on the roof. I think that's a bit unnecessary, but that's just me. If you see one of those
I didn't realize
shots,
that was a G until someone pointed out that it was a G. I spent about a day wondering why there's a J on top of this thing. But now that I see the G, I can't unsee the G. Maybe it should be flipped 180 degrees so that when you're looking at it from the front of the car, it's not an upside down G.
Or maybe it just shouldn't be there at all. That would be my preference.
Where's the fun in that?
I don't know. I'm not a fun guy. But yeah.
But I
this
mean,
might be the most important.
I was saying, we're probably about to say a very similar thing. It's an interesting concept. It seems like a no-brainer considering the appeal of the G-Wagon, the amount of money that people are willing to pay for G-Wagons, that pushing, what is essentially a luxury flagship and an icon into the future is a no-brainer. And it looks like a very smart way of doing it, keeping the things that enthusiasts, off-roading enthusiasts really enjoy about the G-Wagon, the ladder frame, the live axle, the rugged capability, and the style that the influencer set sort of likes in it, that sort of big boxy, it's the G-Wagon when you see it coming down the block. It's like a perfect synthesis of those things. And I love it. Yeah.
Think this is the most important concept Mercedes unveiled at the show, or did you prefer the Maybach?
I mean, I mean, as far as Mercedes' bottom line, the Maybach's probably more interesting in that it essentially is previewing an electric Maybach, but it's also previewing an electric GLS or GLE replacement. So those sort of like more, the GLS and the GLE are big volume sellers for Mercedes. So I think that as a preview of what the future of Mercedes' bottom line is going to look like over the next 10, 15 years, the Maybach is a much more important concept, but this EQG is way more fun to look at.
Absolutely. It's got the wow factor to it. Yeah. So let's wrap things up. One more story on a Volkswagen. I guess the People's Car Company unveiled yet another concept.
Right. It's the Volkswagen ID Life. Basically previewing a little electric hatchback that presumably would slide in underneath the ID3. The ID3 being vaguely golf sized. The ID Life is about polo sized. So much smaller vehicle. It is fully electric. It's got an interesting style with a sort of semi-transparent grille that the headlights hide in. The taillights also sort of peek through their semi-transparent panels on the back. Despite being about the same size as the Polo, it offers around 10% more interior space, which is extremely important for like city cars in Europe. That's why they sort of tend to gravitate towards hatchbacks, because this has to be your everything car. It has to be able to be parked in the really, small parking spots and driven on the narrow streets of Europe. So all the space you can get in it is going to be super important. And the electric platform has really allowed them to squeeze as much interior space into this thing as possible. 62 kilowatt hour battery under the floor. And a 234 horsepower electric motor powering the front wheels. They're estimating around 249 miles of range on that WLTP cycle. If they ever made one here, which they won't, it'd probably be closer to 200 miles. And again, you think that with city cars, range isn't that huge of a deal because you're driving a couple of miles a day, but people who live in the cities don't have garages. So that amount of range in a car that's going to be parked on the street means that you only really need to look to charge it once a week, maybe every other week.
If
so
that even,
still important.
Right?
Yeah, still very important. The performance is not the most interesting part of this car for me, though. It's the interior, which is
looks like we might have lost Antuan. His screen just cut out. But I think what he was saying is the interior, the most interesting part of the Volkswagen ID Life concept. Obviously, the exterior is very cleanly styled, but the interior is roomy, it's bright, and it's airy. And it also has a steering yoke like you get in some of the new Tesla models, which is pretty questionable. I hope that's not a fad that catches on. There's no need for automakers to reinvent literally the steering wheel. There it is, a nice shot of it. The yoke there. Looks like the shifter is also integrated into it right in the center of the wheel there, which is kind of unusual. But that's a trend I don't want to see taking off, because a traditional steering wheel works perfectly fine. Antoine's back. I can see him again.
I'm back, y'all.
Yeah. So I was just trying to fill in for you.
I still hear you.
You were talking about the interior.
Yeah, good chat. Yeah, so I heard you discussing that sort of yoke-style steering wheel, the display that's integrated on. There's also a lot of technology for integrating with smartphones. So there's like a little pocket on the door that you can slide your phone into, and a place on the dashboard for your phone. It's got this sort of like wooden element to the dash with hidden lights and displays in it. And the seats are reconfigurable in a very interesting way. The front seats you can sit in them like a regular chair, but you can also fold them flat to create this really interesting lounge area where you sit in the back seat and you put your feet up on the padded back sides of the front seats. And out of the dashboard, a large screen comes up and there's an integrated projector. So you can sit in the back seat with your feet up, watching a movie or playing a video game. I don't know if that's something that I would want to do, but now that I see it, I kind of want to try it.
It's worth a go, right? And
Yeah.
especially if this is ever going to be fully autonomous, able to drive itself,
Mhm.
like some of the recent Audi concepts have shown, you'll be able to kick back and watch a movie while the car is driving itself. So that'd be a nice way to relax on your long commute to work. Although we've all been working from home, so there's not much opportunity to use that these days. But who knows? Maybe that will change in the future. Um,
Sure. It'd be
but
pretty
yeah,
cool to
VW is
work from a beach or something in the back of this car.
there you go. You could do that. You absolutely could do that. VW is targeting a price of around 20,000 euro, which is about $24,000 for the ID3, which may go on sale around 2025. So just a few years out for that. But yeah, it'd be pretty sweet to see them introduce something like this, of a sort of polo-sized all-electric car. But yeah, that'll just about do it for the reveals from the Munich Auto Show this year.